understanding, but in all of our ways to acknowledge him, and we do because he's cute. You know, he's got a certain body shape that we like, or he's got a certain job. He's a man with power.
Exactly.
And, you know, the power's in God.
Exactly.
The power's in God. And it's interesting because if you're not on the same accord, and if you don't speak the same language.
Exactly.
I heard a guy say that we are all Indians, but we're from different tribes. And, you know, he's right.
Yeah,
because we
absolutely.
can have different views. And it's unfortunate because a lot of that, the breadwinner, the man that your dad's era has passed. I mean, and you're right. There's a lot of women now that move the men into their homes and say, well, I wanted this to work. And you go, well, you know, but you've got children.
Exactly.
And you want to be an example. And as you stated, you're not perfect.
Right.
You're not perfect. But that can be difficult because the choices that your children will make, children pattern what they see.
Oh, absolutely.
They pattern what they see, yes. And so we
Absolutely.
have to lead by example. That is awesome. And I'm sure that there are women that are watching. And this is awesome that Eva's very honest with her story relative to divorce, picking the wrong partner. And I'd like to touch on some different issues as well, because finances, that always goes into play, you know, and not being on the same accord. You know, one may decide, hey, we'd like to budget and prioritize and plan for the children. And one may say, hey, because they haven't grown up yet, you know, this is still about me.
Right.
And that has to definitely be a challenge.
Has a huge effect. Has a huge effect. And I'd like to say that he's not a bad person.
Right.
Which is what I do tell my daughter.
No, it's your children's kids.
But there were areas that I needed to grow in, just as he needed to grow in. And instead of really seeking Christian counseling, we often talk to friends. And that's another thing you really don't want to do. Because sometimes when you talk to friends, they have a different agenda. And they don't always have your best interests at heart. So I admonish everyone, if they're in a situation where the marriage is on the rocks, Christian counseling. Definitely seek the word, see what God has to say. And when you talk to people, make sure it's a Christian counselor and not your friends and relatives, because they're going to take sides
They're biased.
too.
Yes,
so, you know,
yes.
and then if you ever come to the point where you can bring it back together, it's not going to work because these other members that you know in your family and of your friends, they're going to be pulling against you because they're going to say, we already know what you went through. Don't go back. So you have to look at that also.
And you know what? I think that's good to look into the camera and tell some woman there that may be between that rock and that hard place, or a man that may be between the rock and the hard place. You know, should I stay in the marriage because we're both Christians? We want this marriage to work and we're trying to do it God's way, but sometimes it's just not going to work. It's just not there. It's just not there.
Absolutely.
And the counseling piece, I think you're right, because you get friends and family involved and they start voicing their opinions, and then that tension is there. Wow. This is great. Now let me ask you, what were some of the things that you talked to your daughter about relative to dating and what she should look for in a partner?
Okay, she probably doesn't want me to tell a whole lot of it.
Okay.
But when she was in middle school, a lot of her friends were dating.
Okay.
And I had talked to her in middle school, and I told her 16 would be the year that you could date.
Okay.
And so she was like, well, Mom, my friends are going out. They're already dating. And I said, well, Sierra, I'm not their mother. I'm your mother, and I care about what happens to you. And I really think that's a little too young to date. I said, but at 16 years old, you can date. And she goes, oh, okay. I said, but I have to let you know, you can only take company. And of course, that's a phrase from back in the day that a lot of young people don't know about, taking company. And she said, well, Mom, what does that mean? I said, well, taking company means they can come to the house, but you can't leave with them.
Exactly.
And she goes, wait a minute, that's not a date. Well, if that's the way it's going to be, then I'm not dating. I said, it's your choice. Okay. So she chose not to date. And so that really worked in my favor. So I just thank God for that, pulling back from the olden days. So she had guys she would like, and I would say, No. And she go, well,
I can see what you don't see. Exactly.
So when it came down to junior, senior prom, I knew I wanted her to experience the prom. Yes. But I wanted her to wanted it to be a good experience. Sure. So I kind of worked with her hand in hand on the prom date. Very nice looking young man, born again Christian, had a lot going for him. So at first, perfect gentleman. So that was actually her first date, was in junior high. And so it worked out really well. And but of course, she didn't like the guy that I picked out. And I think it was because I really liked him.
Exactly.
And a friend of mine said, you should never have let her
No,
know how much you really liked him.
Look, he's not that cute.
Because it was mom picked him out.
Exactly.
You know? So she actually had to really look at the guy. First of all, is he a Christian?
Oh,
is God first in his life?
Wow.
Because if he's not first in his life and he's not a Christian, move on. It's not going to work.
Yes.
There's no way it's going to work. So that's one of the things I told her to look at. Look at his character,
yes,
his integrity. Also look at how he was raised. You know, because I'm a firm believer that apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Now, he may move away from some of the things if he grows up in a bad situation, but he will still carry some of that with him.
Absolutely.
So
yes, you're a product of your environment.
Oh, absolutely.
Our victim. Okay.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Interjecting some humor.
Yeah.
Sure.
So he had to have similar goals that she had. You know, just because she was going to college, he didn't have to go to college. But what is he going to do with his life?
Yes.
You know, what plans does he have? So I had her look at all of that. What kind of student is he in school? You know, I would tell her that plays a lot in that young man's life. So I had her look at all of that. I said, you know, it's not always the outward looks. I said, but that does help.
It does help. It does help. He will look really nice in that tux.
Yeah. But I said, don't let that be the only thing that you look at when you're looking for a young man today.
Sure. Wow. And you know what's beautiful is that she was receptive.
Yes, she was.
Because a lot of kids now are so rebellious.
Absolutely.
And I mean, when you hear the news, it may be on the news.
Absolutely.
That your kid went out dating, you know, and now with the internet, I mean, it is so scary.
It is scary.
It is so scary. So it's wonderful that you come from that biblical background, those traditional ethics. It's like he will have to come to the house because, you know, and that's how my parents raised us. They would have to see our date. And I would say, don't come to my house and blow. You can forget it, because if you blow, I said, my dad is coming and you can never come back. You can never come back. And what's nice is you can tell the values and the principles that you instilled, and she trusts you.
Yes, she does.
Because a lot of kids now, they go, oh, you're old fashioned. They don't do it that way anymore. What about dressing? What about wardrobe? Because that's a little different. That's a little different. You know, some of the things, you know, are a little bit edgy, and you go, okay. So was that a challenge?
It wasn't a big challenge.
Okay.
There were situations, and she'll probably choke me if I were to go into a lot of detail.
Okay, yes.
But there were situations where she would want to dress like some of her friends, and I would have to remind her, you're walking a different path. You know, all of her friends weren't Christian friends, and I said, you know, I like these young girls, but you can't dress like they do. You know, you can't go to the concerts that they go to, because she had an opportunity to attend several concerts, and sometimes she couldn't understand, well, Mom, you know, this is a decent singer, and everybody. I said, but Sierra, you have to remember who you represent.
Yes.
And so sometimes it was a little hard because she was a teenager.
Growing pains.
And exactly. So, and I didn't expect her to be perfect. And, you know, so, but one thing about us, and that's one thing we've always had, and I hope that we will always keep, is our communication. We can agree, we disagree, we move away from the conversation. There have been times we've had to move away and say,
I don't need to see you right now. Oh, don't call me, I'm fine, all is well. Exactly.
So we've had those moments too, but we come back, and if one of us needs to apologize, we do. And we admit where we're wrong, and I can see what you were talking about. I may not agree with what you're saying, but I see what you're saying, and we try to always tell each other that we love each other.
That is, that's huge.
And that's huge. We try to keep that line of communication going, and which is one of the things I did. I started a nonprofit organization for teenagers called Wordspiration, and it actually started with my daughter.
Wow.
And I had heard all these horror stories about, oh, when she becomes a teenager, oh, things are good now, but you just wait. You just wait. And I was determined that my relationship was not going to change with my daughter, because I loved her, and I wanted the best for her. So I actually wrote a monologue for her to deal with the absence of her father in her life. But then when some of her friends heard about it, they were having issues, and they were like, well, can you write a part for us? So it ended up being a 4-part play, which was performed at Queen's University of Charlotte. And we actually rehearsed here at Christ Our Shepherd a couple of times. And they performed the play at Queen's University of Charlotte. And that's actually how Wordspiration was born. So right now I work with youth, mostly teenagers. We've incorporated some middle school students. But I was determined that I was not going to lose that communication. And see, she didn't realize that when they were rehearsing at the house or rehearsing here at the library, I was there.
Exactly.
So I knew where she was.
Yes.
I knew who she was with.
You're having a good time, yes.
Exactly. And I
Sure.
knew what she was doing when she was out with her friends. She never knew, but it was just like God worked it out to where through high school, we were constantly